Hello, my name is Madeline Adler, and this is the story of how my family of ruthless Wall Street traders, who spent years mocking my life's passion, walked into the most exclusive party of the year to network and instead found my name, my face, and my 8-figure commission printed in the program. They thought I was their biggest failure, the artsy black sheep who wasted her inheritance on a charity case of an art gallery. But for 2 years, I had been living a secret life, and that secret was about to have its very public debut. Before I dive into how I went from being the family joke to the most talked about name in the art and tech worlds overnight, I'd love to know where you're all watching from. So please drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you've ever felt underestimated by the people who should have believed in you the most, go ahead and hit that like button. For all the new faces here, make sure you subscribe to join our community of storytellers who know that the best validation is the kind you earn for yourself. My family operated on a simple, brutal principle. Value was a number on a screen. It was a stock ticker, a portfolio summary, a bottom line. Love, pride, respect, they were all commodities, and their value was directly proportional to your net worth. In the Adler family, you were either an asset or a liability. My father, Richard, was the patriarch of this philosophy. He was a man who spoke in market predictions and measured his days in basis points. My older brother, Thomas, was his protege, a younger, more aggressive version of our father, with a slick smile and a predator's instinct for a weak position. My mother, Eleanor, wasn't a trader, but she was the family's chief social strategist, managing our brand with the same ruthless efficiency her husband managed his hedge fund. And then there was me, Madeline, the liability. From the time I was a little girl, I saw the world not in numbers, but in colors, shapes, and light. While my father was teaching Thomas how to read the Wall Street Journal, I was learning how to mix watercolors to capture the exact shade of a bruised twilight sky. My grandfather, my mother's father, was the only one who understood. He wasn't a finance man. He was a history professor who smelled of old books and pipe tobacco. He'd take me to museums, not as a social obligation, but as a pilgrimage. He would stand with me for what felt like hours in front of a single painting, not talking about its monetary value, but about the story in the brushstrokes, the emotion in the artist's choice of color. "Look, Maddie," he'd whisper, his voice a low rumble. "Look at the way he used that sliver of yellow. It's hope right there. Even in all that darkness, there's a little bit of hope." He was the one who taught me to see. He was my anchor in a family that felt like a stormy, unforgiving sea. When he passed away, the grief was a physical weight. But he left me something that would change my life, something that my family saw only as a dollar amount. He left me his entire life savings. It wasn't a Wall Street fortune, but it was a substantial sum, built over a lifetime of careful saving and modest living. To me, it was the ultimate gift of trust, a final whisper of encouragement from the only person who had ever truly seen me. To my family, it was a problem to be solved. I remember the day the estate was settled. We were in my father's study, a room paneled in dark mahogany and smelling of leather and self-satisfaction. The air was thick with the unspoken expectation that I would, of course, hand the money over to my father and brother to be managed properly. Richard sat behind his enormous desk, steepling his fingers. "Madeline," he began, his tone that of a patient teacher explaining a simple concept to a slow child. "This is a significant opportunity. A nest egg. We can roll this into our emerging markets fund. With our guidance, you could triple this in 5 years. You'd be set for life." Thomas, lounging in a leather armchair, smirked. "Yeah, Maddie. Let the grown-ups handle it. You can stick to your finger painting." I felt that old, familiar shrinking sensation, the feeling of my edges blurring, my voice getting lost in the oppressive certainty of their world. But then I thought of my grandfather. I thought of his calloused hand on my shoulder, the smell of his tweed jacket, the way his eyes twinkled when he talked about a piece of art that moved him. He didn't leave me that money so I could become a smaller, richer version of them. He left it to me so I could be a bigger version of myself. "No," I said. The word was quiet, but it landed in the silent room with the force of a gavel. My father's steeple collapsed. Thomas sat up straight. "I'm not investing it," I continued, my voice gaining strength. "I'm going to use it to open an art gallery." The silence that followed was not respectful. It was the stunned, incredulous silence that precedes a verdict of insanity. My mother, who had been standing by the window, turned around, her face a mask of horrified disbelief. "A gallery? Madeline, be serious. What do you know about running a business?" "It's a hobby, Eleanor," my father said, waving a dismissive hand, his composure already returning. "A very, very expensive hobby. Madeline, this is your grandfather's legacy. You can't just throw it away on a whim, on paint splatters and starving artists." "They're not starving artists, Dad. They're just artists. And it's not a whim," I insisted, my heart pounding. "It's what I want to do. It's what Grandpa would have wanted me to do." Invoking his name was a low blow, and I knew it, but it was the only shield I had. It didn't work. The conversation devolved from there into a lecture on fiscal responsibility, a tirade about the foolishness of passion projects, and a series of condescending questions about my non-existent business plan. I walked out of that study feeling battered and bruised, but with a hard, cold resolve solidifying in my gut. I would do it, and I would prove them all wrong. 6 months later, the canvas Unbound was born. I found a small, neglected storefront in a part of the city that was more grit than glamour. The rent was cheap for a reason. The plumbing was a constant adventure, and the heating was temperamental at best. I poured every cent of my grandfather's money and every ounce of my soul into that place. I painted the walls myself, my clothes perpetually streaked with white primer. I laid the reclaimed wood floors with the help of my friends, the very starving artists my father so casually dismissed. One of them was Leo, a sculptor who worked with scrap metal, turning discarded, rusted pieces of the city into things of breathtaking, fragile beauty. He was my first artist, my first real believer besides myself. The gallery was my sanctuary and my battleground. The early days were brutal. Days would go by when the only person to walk through the door was the mailman. I survived on cheap coffee and the unshakable, possibly delusional, belief that the art on my walls mattered. I championed artists no one had ever heard of. Artists whose work was raw, challenging, and utterly devoid of commercial appeal. It was art that told stories, that screamed and whispered and mourned and celebrated. It was art that my family would have called ugly or a bad investment. The family dinners became my personal crucible. They were mandatory Sunday affairs, and each one felt like a trial. I remember one evening in particular, about a year after the gallery opened. I had just hung a new collection by a young painter named Sophia, whose work was a chaotic explosion of color and texture. I was proud of it, and in a moment of weakness, I showed a photo of her centerpiece on my phone to my mother. "Oh my," Eleanor had said, her lips tightening into a thin line of disapproval. "It's a very bright dear." Thomas, leaning over her shoulder, had let out a bark of a laugh. "Bright? Mom, it looks like a unicorn threw up on a canvas. Who in their right mind would buy that?" "You actually paid money for the stuff, Maddie." "It's about the emotion, Thomas." I tried to explain, my cheeks burning. "It's about the energy. It's about wasting Grandpa's money." My father had interjected from the head of the table, not even looking up from his plate. "I saw your gallery's website. It looks like a charity. You need to feature artists with a proven market history, not these children with crayons." "Leo is getting some recognition," I said, my voice defensive. "He was just shortlisted for the Brewer Prize." Thomas had snorted. "The Brewer Prize? What's that? A gift certificate to an art supply store?" "Maddie, listen to me. I'm trying to help you. Your gallery is a sinking ship. Liquidate what you can, cut your losses, and come work for me. I need a new assistant. The pay is good, and you'll get to see what a real asset looks like. The casual cruelty of it, the offer of a pity job, the complete dismissal of my dream. It was like a physical blow. I remember sitting there, my hands clenched in my lap, the smell of roasted meat and smug superiority filling the air. I didn't say anything else. I just absorbed the humiliation, letting it fuel the fire inside me. They saw a failure. They saw a fool. They had absolutely no idea what was happening in the other half of my life. That other life had begun 6 months earlier with an email. It had appeared in the gallery's generic inbox, buried between spam for printing services and a complaint about our opening hours. The sender was anonymous, just a string of random characters. The subject line was the name of one of my most obscure artists, a recluse from rural Japan who created delicate ink drawings on handmade paper. No one had ever inquired about his work before. The email was short. Your analysis of Isoroka's use of negative space on your blog is the only intelligent thing I have read about his work. You understand, the space between things. You have a good eye. I am interested in acquiring his entire collection. Name your price. I thought it was a prank, probably from one of Leo's friends. But something about the stark, declarative tone felt different. I replied cautiously, professionally, quoting the prices and outlining the acquisition process. The response came within minutes. The price is acceptable. A courier will arrive at your gallery tomorrow at 10 a.m. with a cashier's check for the full amount, plus a 30% commission for you. Have the pieces ready. I would also like to schedule a meeting with you. The next morning, a black car with tinted windows pulled up in front of the canvas unbound. A man in a sharp suit, who looked more like a Secret Service agent than a courier, walked in, handed me a briefcase, and said, "From Mr. Finch." Inside was a cashier's check for an amount that made my hands shake, and a single, crisp card with an address and a time. That was how I met Alistair Finch. The address wasn't a sleek corporate headquarters. It was a cavernous, unmarked warehouse in the industrial part of town. The man who greeted me was not what I expected. He was tall and thin, with a shock of unruly dark hair and eyes that seemed to be taking in everything at once. He wore a simple gray sweater and jeans, but he moved with an aura of intense, coiled energy. He wasn't a typical billionaire. There was no pretense, no small talk. He led me through the warehouse, which was mostly empty except for a few crates and a simple table with 2 chairs. "I'm Alistair," he said, his voice quiet but resonant. "I'm a software engineer. I've done well. And now I want to build something. Something real. Something that will last longer than code." He had been following my gallery's blog for months. He said he was tired of the art world establishment, the advisors who recommended the same 10 famous artists, the collectors who bought art as a status symbol to hang over their fireplaces. "They buy names," he said, pacing in front of me. "I want to buy souls. I want to build the most important private collection of emerging 21st century art in the world. And I want you to be the one to build it for me." I was speechless. "Me? Why me?" "Because you don't care about the names," he said, stopping to look at me directly. "You care about the work. You saw the genius in Isoroka when no one else did. You see the hope in the darkness. Your family thinks you're a fool, don't they?" The question was so direct, so unnervingly accurate, that I could only nod. "Good," he said. "People who are underestimated are the most dangerous. They have nothing to lose and everything to prove. I want you to be my sole advisor. My chief curator. You will have an unlimited budget. You will have my complete trust. But there is one condition. It must be an absolute secrecy. No one can know. Not your friends, not your family. To the world, you are just Madeline Adler, owner of a small, struggling art gallery. Are you in?" It was a lifeline. It was a fantasy. It was the ultimate validation, coming from a complete stranger who saw in me what my own family refused to. "I'm in," I said, my voice barely a whisper. And just like that, my double life began. I was living a paradox. By day, I was arguing with my landlord over a leaky faucet and counting the pennies in the gallery's cash box. I was eating instant noodles with Leo and fretting about making payroll. But by night, I was a ghost, a powerful, invisible force in the international art market. I was the curator, a pseudonym Alistair and I had created. I was on encrypted video calls from my tiny apartment, negotiating with Swiss art dealers. I was taking private jets to secret viewings in Berlin, my heart pounding with the thrill of the hunt. I was authorizing wire transfers for amounts that could have bought my entire city block. The contrast was dizzying, a constant, head-spinning state of cognitive dissonance. And the weight of the secret was immense, a heavy cloak I could never take off. As my secret life flourished, my family's fortunes, ironically, began to turn. The infallible market my father and brother worshipped had turned on them. Their aggressive, high-risk strategies, which had worked for years in a bull market, were now hemorrhaging money in a downturn. I'd overhear snippets of their panicked conversations when I was at the house for our obligatory Sunday dinners. Voices were tighter, tempers were shorter. I heard phrases like unprecedented volatility, client redemptions, and margin calls. My father, who had always carried himself with the unshakable confidence of a king, now had a permanent furrow in his brow. Thomas, whose arrogance had always been his defining feature, was now defensive and jumpy. Their financial stress made them even more vicious towards me. It was a classic case of deflection. My perceived failure was a comforting distraction from their very real one. My little gallery, my pity project, became the designated punching bag, the one thing they could still feel superior to. Their mockery intensified, taking on a desperate, almost cruel edge. It was as if by diminishing me, they could somehow prop up their own crumbling sense of self-worth. Meanwhile, in my other world, I was pulling off the biggest acquisition of my career. It was a piece by an artist named Anya Petrova, a brilliant but notoriously difficult multimedia artist from Ukraine. Her latest work, a massive, haunting installation titled Echo Chamber, was a commentary on digital isolation and the decay of memory. It was exactly the kind of challenging, profound work that Alistair and I were looking for. And it was the very piece I had once tried to describe to my brother, who had laughed and called it pretentious garbage. Getting to Echo Chamber was a cloak and dagger operation. Anya didn't work with galleries or dealers. You had to go through a network of trusted contacts, and she had to personally approve the buyer. It took me 2 months of careful, persistent effort, using back channels and leveraging the reputation I was secretly building as the curator, just to get a meeting. The final negotiation happened not in a boardroom, but over a crackling video call to her studio in Kiev, with air raid sirens wailing faintly in the background. She was a formidable woman with sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to see right through any pretense. She grilled me for an hour, not about money, but about my interpretation of her work. She wanted to know that her creation was going to someone who understood its soul, not just its price tag. I spoke from the heart, talking about the themes of loss and connection, the way she used fragmented light to represent fleeting memories. At the end of the call, she was silent for a long moment. Then she gave a curt nod. "The work is yours," she said. "The price is 7 million euros. But it goes to you, the curator, not to some faceless billionaire." Alistair was ecstatic when I told him. "You see, Madeline," he'd said, his voice buzzing with excitement on our encrypted line. "This is why it's you. You connect with them. You're not buying, you're building a sanctuary." The thrill of that success was a warm glow inside me, but it was a solitary one. I couldn't share it with anyone. Back in my real life, the sanctuary was crumbling. The canvas unbound was on the brink of collapse. The initial inheritance was gone, swallowed by rent, utilities, and the modest stipends I gave my artists. I received a formal eviction notice, a stark, legal document taped to my gallery door. I had 30 days. I sat in my small, cold office in the back, the letter trembling in my hand, and felt a wave of despair, so profound it almost buckled me. I was a fraud. A spectacular success in a world no one knew about, and a colossal failure in the one that was real. The temptation to tell Alistair, to ask for an advance or a loan, was immense. The money was there. He had billions. But my pride, a stubborn, foolish thing I had inherited from my family, held me back. The gallery was mine. It was the one thing I had built with my own 2 hands, with my grandfather's legacy. Asking for a handout felt like a betrayal of that dream, an admission that my family had been right all along. It was my lean-in flaw, my Achilles heel, this desperate need to prove that at least one part of my life could succeed on its own terms, without a man's money behind it. I started looking for part-time jobs, anything to keep the lights on for 1 more month. I considered calling my brother and swallowing my pride, asking for that receptionist job. I was at my absolute lowest point, drowning in self-doubt and the quiet, gnawing fear of total failure. And that was when the invitation arrived for my mother's birthday dinner. It was the last place on earth I wanted to be, but attendance was not optional. The dinner was at a stuffy, Michelin-starred restaurant that my parents loved. The air was thick with the scent of money and expensive perfume. From the moment I sat down, I was on the defensive. My father was in a particularly foul mood. I learned later he had lost a major client that day. He didn't speak to me directly, but he made loud, pointed comments to the table about the importance of a tangible return on investment and the foolishness of throwing good money after bad. Thomas, however, was direct. He'd had a few glasses of expensive wine, and his usual smirk was replaced with a sneer. "So, Maddie," he said, his voice loud enough for the neighboring tables to hear. "How's the sad little art project going? Still pretending to be a businesswoman?" I felt 100 pairs of eyes on me. I just stared at my plate. "It's fine, Thomas. Fine? I heard you're getting kicked out of that dump you rent." "Is that true?" he pressed, a gleam of malicious satisfaction in his eyes. He must have heard it through the grapevine, a friend of a friend who knew my landlord. The public humiliation was his goal. My mother jumped in, her voice dripping with faux concern that was more corrosive than open hostility. "Madeline, darling, your brother is just worried. We're all worried. This gallery experiment has gone on long enough. It was a sweet idea, but it's time to be realistic. Your father was saying he could get you an interview in the HR department at his firm. It's stable. A real job. With benefits. A real job." The phrase hung in the air, a final damning judgment on my entire existence. My passion, my dream, my sweat and tears and sleepless nights. It was all just an experiment, a phase, something to be put away like a childhood toy. It wasn't the criticism of the gallery that broke me. It was the complete and utter erasure of me. They didn't see a daughter or a sister. They saw a failed investment, a messy problem to be cleaned up and hidden away in a respectable-sounding administrative role. I looked at their faces. My brother, smug and triumphant. My mother, her face a carefully constructed mask of concern. My father, silent and disapproving, implicitly endorsing every word. And in that moment, something inside me didn't just break. It vaporized. The part of me that had spent 30 years craving their approval, the part that flinched at their criticism and ached for a single word of praise, turned to dust. It was gone. I felt nothing. No anger, no hurt, just a vast, cold, liberating emptiness. The need was gone. The desperation was gone. I was finally truly free. I didn't say a word. I simply picked up my napkin, placed it on the table, and stood up. "Excuse me," I said, my voice eerily calm. "I have to leave." I walked out of that restaurant without looking back, leaving them sitting in a stunned, confused silence. I didn't know what I was going to do about the gallery, but I knew one thing for certain. I was done. I was done with them. I was done trying to be someone they could understand. A week later, the news broke. It started as a ripple in the financial papers and quickly became a tsunami in the art world. Reclusive tech billionaire Alastair Finch to unveil world-class private art collection in pop-up museum exhibition. The story was everywhere. It was the most anticipated cultural event of the decade. The collection, valued at over $1 billion, had been assembled in complete secrecy over the past 2 years. The opening night gala was to be the most exclusive ticket in the world, a gathering of titans from every industry. My family was obsessed. For them, it was the ultimate networking event. My father saw a chance to get in front of Finch, a potential white knight investor who could save his struggling fund. Thomas saw an opportunity to schmooze with Finch's inner circle, to find new clients and salvage his tattered reputation. They pulled every string they had. They called in favors they had been saving for years. They humbled themselves to old rivals. A few days before the event, my mother called me, her voice giddy with success. "We got them, Madeline. 3 tickets to the Finch Collection Gala. It was nearly impossible, but your father managed it. You should see the guest list." She paused and then added, with the casual condescension that was her native language, "It's a shame you can't come, dear. But it's probably for the best. You'd be so out of your element. Still, it would be a good learning experience for you. You could see what a real art collection looks like." The irony was so thick, so rich, I almost laughed out loud. "You're right, Mom," I said, my voice perfectly neutral. "I'm sure it will be a very educational evening for all of you." I hung up the phone and looked at the invitation sitting on my desk. It wasn't one of the ones my father had groveled for. It was a heavy, cream-colored card, delivered by a private courier that morning. It was addressed to me. And on the back, in Alistair's spiky, hurried handwriting, were 5 simple words. Time to show them, Madeline. The night of the gala was electric. The exhibition was housed in a decommissioned power station on the edge of the river, its industrial skeleton transformed by light and shadow into a cathedral of modern art. Limousines lined the street for blocks, depositing a glittering stream of people onto the red carpet. The air buzzed with power, money, and anticipation. I arrived not in a limo, but in a simple black town car, slipping in through a private side entrance Alistair had arranged. I had spent more time choosing my outfit than I had for any event in my life. I wore a simple, elegant gown of deep emerald silk, a color that spoke of quiet confidence and new growth. My hair was pulled back, my makeup understated. I wasn't hiding anymore. I was ready to be seen. From a discreet balcony overlooking the main hall, I watched my family arrive. They looked like children in a candy store, their heads swiveling, their eyes wide with a mixture of awe and avarice. My father was already scanning the crowd, identifying potential targets. Thomas was straightening his tie, a predatory gleam in his eye. My mother was clutching her small, expensive handbag, her posture rigid with the effort of trying to look like she belonged. They looked so small from up here, so consumed by their own desperate ambitions. I watched them wander into the first exhibition space. And then I heard it, the exact words I knew they would say. "Good God, Richard, look at this," my mother whispered, loud enough for me to read her lips. She was gesturing towards a triptych of massive canvases, the chaotic, beautiful, explosive work of Sophia, the very artist whose painting my brother had compared to unicorn vomit. Thomas scoffed, shaking his head. "I don't get it. This is what $1 billion buys you? A bunch of stuff that looks like it was made by a toddler. Finch must have more money than sense." My father, ever the analyst, chimed in. "It's a bubble, Thomas. Pure speculation. These artists have no intrinsic value. It's a house of cards. But the man who built the house, that's who I want to meet." They moved on, oblivious, continuing their running commentary of dismissive critiques, each word a perfect, exquisitely ironic echo of the things they had said to me for years. They were passing judgment on a collection that I had poured my entire being into, a collection that was, in every meaningful way, mine. A strange sense of calm settled over me. It wasn't anger. It wasn't even vindication, not yet. It was the quiet, steady hum of a secret about to be told. The main presentation was about to begin. Guests were being ushered into the central turbine hall, where a stage was set up in front of the collection's crown jewel, Anya Petrova's echo chamber. I made my way down to the floor, taking a seat in the reserved front section, next to the director of the MoMA and a few of the artists I had championed, all of whom Alistair had flown in for the event. I saw my family find their seats several rows back, in the general section. They hadn't seen me yet. An usher, a young woman in a chic black uniform, moved down the aisles, handing out the evening's program. It was a masterpiece of printing, a thick, heavy book bound in linen with the exhibition's logo embossed in silver. It was my resume, my confession, and my Declaration of Independence, all bound into 100 perfect pages. I watched as an usher handed one to my father. He took it, his expression one of mild impatience, eager for the main event to start. Thomas immediately began flipping through his, no doubt looking for a list of donors to hit up later. Eleanor held hers delicately in her lap, as if it were a fragile artifact. I could see their faces, illuminated by the soft glow of the stage lights. I saw Thomas's finger stop on a page. He frowned, leaning over to show my father. Richard adjusted his glasses, peering at the page. My mother leaned in, a flicker of confusion crossing her features. They were looking at the page dedicated to the artist Sophia, with a glowing biographical essay. An essay I had written. But that wasn't it. That wasn't the moment. Later that afternoon, I met Alistair at the empty gallery, the day after the storm. He was leaning against one of the walls, a rare, small smile on his face. So he said, "Did you enjoy the look on their faces?" "It wasn't about that," I said, and I was surprised to find that I meant it. "Not really. It wasn't about revenge." I walked over to stand beside him, looking out at the art-filled space. It was about being seen. For who I am. Not for the person they wanted me to be. Well, the world sees you now, he said. He gestured towards my small office, where the phone had been ringing off the hook all morning. The Canvas Unbound is the most famous gallery in the country today. And that artist your brother hates so much? Sophia? A collector from Dubai just called my office and bought her entire collection. Sight unseen. We stood in silence for a moment, and it felt like the most comfortable silence in the world. I walked back to my own gallery later that day. The street outside was mobbed. There were news vans, reporters with microphones, and a line of well-dressed people hoping to get a look inside. The eviction notice was still taped to the door, a relic from a different lifetime. I took it down, folded it neatly, and put it in my pocket. When I unlocked the door, Leo was inside, trying to handle the influx of calls. He looked up, his face a mixture of exhaustion and pure joy. He rushed over and lifted me up in a bear hug. "We did it, Maddie," he laughed. "Look at this place. You did it." And in his eyes, I saw the reflection of the person I had finally become. A week later, I called a family meeting. I didn't go to their house, to my father's mahogany-paneled study. I had them come to me. They sat on uncomfortable modern chairs in my office at the Canvas Unbound, a space that now buzzed with the energy of success. They looked out of place, like tourists in a foreign country whose language they didn't speak. My father tried to take control, to steer the conversation towards investment strategies and family funds. I held up a hand, and he fell silent. It was the first time in my life that had ever happened. "I didn't call you here to talk about money," I said, my voice calm and steady. "I called you here to talk about us. For my entire life, I have been a disappointment to you. My choices, my passion, my friends, my life, it has all been a source of shame or amusement for you. And I have spent my entire life trying to win an unwinnable game. I'm not playing anymore." I looked at each of them in turn. "From now on, here are the new rules. My life is not a topic for your debate. My business is not a subject for your critique. My friends are not here for your ridicule. You will either treat me and the life I have built with respect, or you will not be a part of it. I don't want your money. I don't want your advice. And I don't want your apologies unless they are real. The choice is yours." The silence in the room was absolute. My mother started to cry, soft, manipulative tears. "Madeline, how can you say that? We're your family. We love you." "Love, for you, has always been conditional," I replied, my voice gentle but firm. "It was conditional on my grades, on my choices, and on my income. I'm just making the conditions clear from my side now. The condition is respect." Thomas, ever the opportunist, saw his angle disappearing. "This is ridiculous, Maddie. After all we've done for you." My father, however, just looked at me. For the first time, I think he was actually seeing me. The bluster was gone. The certainty was gone. He looked tired. He looked old. "We were wrong," he said, the words sounding rusty, like they hadn't been used in decades. I was wrong. It wasn't a full apology, not yet. But it was a crack in the foundation. A beginning. Months have passed since that night. The Canvas Unbound is thriving. I've hired a staff, and I'm expanding into the space next door. I've become a voice for the kind of artists I've always believed in. The outsiders, the visionaries, the ones who tell the truth. My relationship with my family is a work in progress. It's distant, but it's polite. They are trying, in their own clumsy, self-serving ways, to adapt to this new reality. They haven't mocked me once. Whether their change of heart is genuine or simply a pragmatic response to my newfound status, I don't know. And I've realized I don't really care. My peace no longer depends on their approval. Just last week, I was at a major art auction in New York. Not as a secret agent for a billionaire, but as myself, Madeline Adler, owner of a respected gallery. I was bidding on a piece by a young, unknown sculptor. The bidding was fierce, against a representative from a huge, established gallery. In the end, I won. As I signed the paperwork, I felt a quiet, profound sense of peace. I wasn't the black sheep anymore. I wasn't a liability. I had taken my grandfather's legacy, the money they saw as a number, and turned it into something real. I had built a life out of color and light and hope, right in the middle of all the darkness. The best investment I ever made wasn't in art. It was the moment I finally decided to invest in myself. So that's my story. It's a story about finding your own definition of value in a world that wants to define it for you. And my biggest lesson was that sometimes the people who underestimate you the most aren't your biggest obstacle. They're your greatest motivation. Thank you so much for listening to my journey tonight. I would be so honored if you shared a piece of your own story in the comments below. Have you ever had to prove your worth to people who refuse to see it? How did you find the strength to believe in yourself? Don't forget to like this video if my story resonated with you, and please subscribe to the channel for more stories about overcoming the odds. I hope this story inspires you to trust your own vision, even when no one else does. Remember that your value is inherent. It's not up for debate. Thank you for being here with me.